We are going to focus primarily on the results of a survey that we did late last year. We will talk a little bit about our other projects, and of course, if anybody has any questions on any of that, we are more than happy to answer any kind of questions that you have at all. But I'd like to share my screen now and get right into the survey results. And I will also talk a little bit and intro the other websites and projects and things that we have as well before I get into the details of that survey. Okay? Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much everybody for coming to hear about the survey results and the work that we're doing across all of our different sites and projects and things. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to focus on the After Death Communication and Grief Survey, which was started last mid-November. And it is ongoing. So if anybody has not answered the survey, they can certainly do that. But we wanted to present the information that we had so far. My name is Michelle Subbo. I am the co-creator of these websites, which I will speak about in just a moment. They are very quickly AfterLifeData, Afterlife Library, and Voices Across the Veil. I'm a researcher and a writer, author, artist, designer, spiritual advisor, Reiki master. I like doing lots of different things. My partner in crime is Dr. Dennis Grega. He is the co-creator of all these sites. He has a PhD in research psychology and is an author and writer, does all of our great database work and programming work, which just takes up so very much of his time. Just to give you a little bit of background, we have 4 websites. Back in 2007, some people who have become dear friends of ours, Jackie and Mike Davis, started a website called Afterlife 101. And Dennis came upon this website and started talking with Mike and said, gee, we really like to know what other people say about all of the different topics that you have on your website. So that led to doing more research and creating AfterLifeData, which then uses all of the 265 Afterlife topic areas that come from Afterlife 101, and we expanded on that to see who else said what about all of these different topics. So if you want to grab a coffee or a tea or something and hang out with AfterLifeData for a while, then you can go and read all about all those different topics. In 2012, we realized that there were an awful lot of books out there that really were so important to everything, but we didn't really use them as source material for Afterlife data. So we created Afterlife Library so that we could have a repository of all of that information someplace. And we continually update that site as well. Then in 2014, we created Voices Across the Veil, which now houses our studies and research for online small group experiences with evidential mediums. Another study that is what we call CCR with AREI, and this was a cross-communication study, and we are still working on the results of that study. And then we are going to be doing some channeling work as well in the near future. Initial questions cover these different things. What proportion of people believe that they have received after-death communication? What effect did these perceived communications have upon their grief? How willing were they to share these experiences with others, including grief counselors? And what types of reactions have they received from others, including those grief counselors? And then, of course, what is their current belief in the afterlife? So that survey, beginning November 15th, and as I mentioned, it is ongoing. We had 437 participants to date. That's as of yesterday. And we had a series of questions, and I'm going to go over all of those with you now very quickly because I know I only have about 30 minutes. So the first question was, how long has it been since the death of your loved one? So you can see here that most of the people are a year or more.
Yeah,
So
Michelle, let me jump in a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
It would have been nice if we had also included how soon the communication came after the person's transition. We didn't do that, but this kind of reflects what a lot of people in the afterlife research arena knows, and that is that when people transition, they go through a process of training and education, and in some cases, rehabilitation, so that in not all cases are people adept upon their transition to be able to communicate. And so I think even though this is the first question and it looks kind of innocuous, it actually kind of reflects the underlying reality that people sometimes will wait years before a communication, or that people have been transitioned for a while before they're able to communicate, before they become adept at communicating. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that out in terms of this.
Question number 2, have you had an experience that you believe connected to your deceased loved one? So most of the people, as you can see, that we were speaking with did actually have that experience. Then we went on to ask them, if you answered yes to the previous question, how did you have this connection? I'm sorry, I've got to go back one. There we go. Of course, dreams, that is a very popular one. Some people hear it through music, some through physical touch or visions. Many people also see these communications and connections through some type of symbolic events. These butterflies, numbers, pennies, lights flickering, unexplained sounds, or other events and items that would tightly be associated with their loved one. Some people hear things, and also electronic voice phenomenon seems to be something that people are also connected to. Many people work privately with a medium, and then many people also work with mediums in small groups. And we specifically asked, in this case, whether it was either on their own or through a Voices Across the Veil small group session, because we didn't want anybody to think that we were, just leaning toward our Voices Across the Veil, or just leaning toward their own work with a small group, or through the direct personal communication sessions on Voices Across the Veil. And then of course there were some other ones as well. But Dennis, do you want to comment on any of that?
Well, one of the things is that there's a wide diversity of possibilities here. So in some respect, you should expect the unexpected. However, I think in a lot of the responses, people were getting communication. I think in terms of the types of connections to expect is that the deceased will try to reach through to you on something that is of your interest, whether you're interested in music or in their interest. So they'll bring out particular events or occurrences that really point to who the person is that's trying to get through. And I think in this case, though, because of the diversity, expect the unexpected and just keep aware and keep open to the possibilities.
Question was, how many of these experiences do you believe you have had since your loved one transitioned? And you can see that 2/3 of the people are saying that they have these many times, 5 or more. I do know some people that we've spoken to have communications regularly. So again, it's quite overwhelming. Question number 5, have these experiences changed your feelings of grief regarding this loved one? And this is a very important. Question 6 with 330 responses, and I just pulled just a very few of these out. There's so many of them. If they answered yes to the previous question, have the experiences been positive or negative? And we asked them to please explain in an open-ended text area, what they meant by whether it was positive or negative. So we wanted to get a lot more information than just yes or no. So I'll just give you a moment if you want to just scan through that. Question 7, if you have had an experience with your loved one, have the experiences increased, decreased, or remained the same since the initial experience? And interestingly, they've remained about the same most of the time. And some people even say that they have decreased. Dennis, I would love to hear your comments on this particular slide.
Well, actually, mine have decreased. It took my mom about 8 years after she transitioned to finally communicate through a number of oral experiences. And and she visited other members of the family. And for about 2 years, we had constant experiences. But I have to be honest with you, over the last, I would say, 6 or 7 years, there has been little to no communication, which makes me think she's on to other things that are better than just having to communicate anymore. But I don't have any theory as to why it would remain the same for some, decrease for others, or increase. I think it also depends on the individuals on the other side, that they also are doing things themselves. Once you get the communication and it's so real that you can't deny it, and then it continues for a while, then after a while it decreases. And it's also well known that in the afterlife, when you first transition, you're still somewhat earth-oriented, earth-focused, but over time, in our terms, becomes less and less so. So that's my say for that.
So on to question 8. Have you sought counseling for your grief? Interesting that 70% have said no. So question 9, if you answered yes to the previous question, did your counselor ask you about your beliefs about the afterlife? And to me, very sadly, overwhelmingly, we see 68% say no to that. To me, this leaves a huge hole in terms of healing for these particular people. Dennis, I'm sure you have plenty to say about that as well. Okay. Go ahead.
When you're in graduate school, you're just not trained or taught or educated to take into account the belief systems that others may have regarding extra normal possibilities. And I can say that. I mean, I had to fight just to do some paranormal research when I was in graduate school, because you're just not taught to believe in the possibility of its existence. So, a lot of counselors and therapists go into the world of therapeutics unprepared for these kinds of experiences and don't know how to deal with them.
I don't know if we have anybody in the audience today that is perhaps a little younger than us, perhaps maybe got out of college within the last 10 to 20 years, and might have some comment on that when we get to the questions section of this after our presentation. So if there is anybody in our audience, please note this for yourself, and we would love to hear your experiences as well. So on to the next question. Did your counselor ask you if you had any after-death experiences with your loved one? 75% no. So this just goes right back to, that same type of question and same type of issue where the counselors just, are not trained perhaps, or don't want to kind of go there with their clients. Question 11, if your counselor did ask you about your after-death experiences, did you share the experiences with your counselor? I find it very interesting that, that subset, right? We had 1/4 of them said yes, 3/4 said no. And then of those, let me just reread, if your counselor did ask you about your after-death, did you share these? So, this very small subset, only half of them shared. So there's some kind of fear going on there with these people that they don't feel like they can share this information. So question 12, if you answered no to sharing your after-death experiences with your counselor or mental health professional, why not? And again, I'll give you just a few moments to look at these quickly. And of course, these will be on the recording as well later. So, you can always go back in and look at these in more detail. Actually, the one in the middle column, I felt very sad when I read this. At the time of my wife's death, grief counseling wasn't available in my area. And when I went to visit a counselor through a hospital, they wanted me to check into a grief program, stay in the hospital. When I refused to check in, they wanted me to drive every day to the hospital for grief counseling 5 days a week at over 15 miles a day, one way. It just wasn't feasible. So I went to AMHR, and they acted like they didn't know what to do with a normal person with grief. The doctor there gave me some meds, one for stress that caused a seizure that caused me to fall, cracking my tailbone, which caused me so much pain for over 2 months. I mean, this poor person is not being helped. It's awful to read something like this.
I pulled out 3 other responses made to
Mm-hmm.
that question. And one person said, the line of questioning appeared to be leaning towards an assessment for schizophrenia. Another person said, did not want to receive the DSM-5 judgment. And another person said, well, the counselor was more interested in making me accept the loss and move on so I could have a fulfilling life here. Well, she was sympathetic enough and would have listened to what I would have said, she would have seen it as delusional at worst or escapism at best. And so that's the fear that people have in terms of relaying their experience.
Okay, so let's go on to the next question. Question 13, if you answered yes to sharing your after-death experiences with your counselor or mental health professional, what was their reaction? I found it actually very positive that some people did feel that they could share and that they were supported, which was really wonderful. So even though some of those other ones weren't so great, we did get some very positive feedback from some of the people who did have counselors who were willing to understand them and hear them and talk to them. So again, I'll just give you a few moments. I do want to read quickly the one in the lower left. I attended a psychologist at the GP medical practice I have attended for 20 years. I told her about my experiences. She reported back to my GP that she believed I was a delusional psychotic. Bad mistake. My GP was an Indian and a Hindu practitioner who, like me, believed in the afterlife. He laughed and told me I had nothing to worry about. The psychologist was terminated. It was not, even though she did not have a good experience there at some level, it was nice to know that somebody had her back or his back. I don't even know if that was him or her. So if you have had after-death experiences with your deceased loved one, have you shared them with family, friends, clergy, medical, or mental professionals? And overwhelmingly, we see that people have shared them. And if we go on to question 15, if you answered no, we were kind of curious as to, well, why didn't some of these people share them? This is primarily, people were afraid. They're afraid to be thought of as crazy. The one in the top right was particularly telling. I'm afraid my family would react negatively toward me, so I have not shared despite my wife asking me to. Some of them may feel that I was crazy, and that may give an excuse to at least one of them to try to remove my independence and my possessions. I mean, what a horrible way to live, to have to worry about that. It really is time, I think, that afterlife studies and people need to be listened to when it comes to this. It's so, so important. I see Karen saying yes, yes.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
Yeah, people are afraid that they're going to be labeled as, crazy and everything else. And, we have a whole audience here of people who are very sound of mind and, wonderful human beings. And yet, there are so many people that, would not listen to, us or them. And I don't know, it's just a little frustrating sometimes, I think, for a lot of people. Okay, so quickly on this one, if you answered yes to sharing your after-death experiences with family, friends, clergy, and medical professionals, what was their reaction? So, it ranges from skeptical and amazed, to just positive. Some people say, family laughed me off as having strange beliefs. It really runs the gamut. And our final question was, do you believe in the afterlife or life after death? And of course, the people that we were talking to, this was not a surprising answer because of, who we sent the survey out to, but we did want to see, what the answer was to this. So, and as a quick summary, just, what did we learn? Assimilating the loss through afterlife beliefs is worthy of effort. That was very clear through the answers that we had received. Next, we see many mental health practitioners do not start the conversations or respond in a way that is supportive of client beliefs and experiences. And this is something that we feel very strongly at AfterLifeData, and I know that that needs to change. And this is for the benefit of the people that these mental health practitioners are trying to help. After-death communications in either client-generated direct personal communication or through mediums are important for grief clients. And I know that through our work with the small group sessions as well as the direct personal communication, it has been life-changing. So for so many of the people that have attended those sessions, you know, we see emails and testimonials and, you know, people contacting us back saying, oh my goodness, this was amazing. It has changed my life. So, and lastly, therapists must be open to discussing their clients' afterlife beliefs and other death-specific spiritual and religious beliefs without judgment.
You know,
So,
about 2 years ago, I sent out well over 100 letters to grief organizations around the United States and asking if they were interested in working with us through the Voices Across the Veil to bring in afterlife information or communications to people that they were seeing. And I got, I think, maybe 3 responses back. So, you know, there's a lot of closed-mindedness out there, or you know, unwillingness to be open to at least check it out and see what happens.
great, thank you. So I'd like to thank everybody. I'm wrapping it up fairly quickly so that we can keep this open for questions. And you know, Dennis and I will be here. Please feel free to ask us whatever you need to.